south of Nantucket, east of Chatham. It's usually a longer run, but if those boats are telling me that we're seeing them every day, then we'll go for a run and we'll check it out. Last year, we had those fish June 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and there was a ton of them there for a 4 or 5 day period. We sat on top of them, we jigged them, there was nothing on the surface, and we were doing 10, 15, 20 fish a day. It was huge numbers. On day 5 or 6, those fish disappeared. We had 6 or 7 boats out there looking for them. There was none to be found anywhere. None. So those fish disappeared, and they never went back to that spot. We never saw them again. That time of year, typically those fish are what we call racers. They're in one day, they're gone the next. And those are the migratory fish that are just getting here. They're lean, there's not a lot of fat on them, and they're going to be here one day, gone the next. That's why intel that time of year isn't as valuable as it is once the residency of the fish set up in the summer. So these fish, they're going to come up from the south, they're going to come up in from the east, and they're going to sit around for a little bit, and then they're off on their way. They're going to go up to New Hampshire, they're going to go up to Maine, they're going to go up to PEI, Canada, stuff like that. So the intel that you get from people or other fishermen that time of year isn't as valuable. They can say, yes, we found the fish here, but going there the next day, the likelihood of them being there it's probably less than 50-50. While in July and August, if I get that same intel from people, if I go there the next day, the likelihood that they're going to be there again is pretty high. So this time of year, it's kind of, you don't know where you're going to end up, and you don't know where they're going to be because they're moving constantly. The water temperatures are different everywhere that time of year. You got real high water temperatures, real low water temperatures, the bottom's real cold, the surface is real warm, the fish don't know what to do, the bait is just getting there. Everything is all swirling around, and it's the same with the fish patterns that they have too. So typically we find these fish east of Chatham. There's a big misconception, and we've figured this out over the years through satellite tags that pop off so we can see where these fish go, that the fish that we get off of the Cape, people typically think they come up the coastline, they go around Nantucket, around the Vineyard, around Monomoy, and then they come up to the east side of the Cape. And that's not the case. Those fish typically, when we see them on the Cape, they're coming from the east. They're coming off of that edge, they're coming from the Georges, they're coming from the Mediterranean. The fish that we find south of the Vineyard or Nantucket, the reason why those fish don't typically come around the Cape is because that water southeast of Nantucket is usually ice cold. So the temperature charts we've been looking at for the past 3 or 4 or 5 years is as you come southeast of Nantucket and you're coming down, you're going to see this big, huge area. So last year and the year before, it was stretching all the way down to hydrographers and almost Hudson Canyon. And it's all in the 45 to 50 degree water. Bright, dark blue on the temperature charts. So those fish that are down by the claw and coxes and the dump and stuff, if they're going to come around the Cape, what's going to happen is they're going to start moving below the islands, and they're going to hit that cold water, and they're going to either turn around and go back, or they're going to follow that cold water down to the canyons till they find warm water again, and they're going to stay there because they don't know what's on the other side of that cold water. So they're not going to blast through it hoping to find warm water because they don't know what's there. So the satellite tags that have popped up after they've been in a fish for a week or two show us where they come from. So most of the fish from the east, on the east side of the Cape, are coming from the east. And the spotter planes are telling us that too. Because the spotter planes, they're way out in Wilkinson Basin, and they're in the middle of nowhere. And they're like, yeah, we just saw 3, 4, 5 miles of fish. And those fish are northeast of the Cape in mid-June, when people typically think they're coming from the south. They're not. So I don't know how many of you guys fish the Cape, but 3 years ago, we had an absolute biomass of fish show up I think it was July 1st or July 2nd. The day before that, there was no tuna anywhere, none at all. And then a lobsterman buddy of mine called me and he said, Matt, there's tuna everywhere. So we loaded up, we rigged up, and we went out the next day, and there were tuna everywhere. If those tuna had come from the south, everybody in Chatham, the Golf Ball, Monomoy, Nantucket would have seen them within the last week coming, but they didn't. They just blasted in and they took over the entire tip of the Cape from the east. You know, so that's where I tend to focus, is in the deeper water. Temperature charts haven't been. I never used to look at temperature charts, and now we're actually looking at temperature charts because we're actually looking for warmer water. So the water surrounding the Cape, and this isn't conspiracy, this isn't anything like that. This is, people can look back at the temperatures over the past 3 or 4 years in the Cape, especially east of Nantucket, and it is frigid cold. I mean, we had days in July and August 2 years ago, we were in 48-degree water. Right? We could almost see our breath. It was freezing cold. And the tuna aren't coming through that. And this is a pattern that we've seen where the fishing has become a little more difficult over the past 3 or 4 years, because that stretch between Monomoy over the shoals and out to the canyons never used to be this cold. And that cold water has been sitting there every summer. And cold water is, I don't know how to say, cold water, it's stiffer, but cold water doesn't move as much as warm water does. So if you're a huge body of cold water, it takes a lot more current, wind, and weather to move that cold water out of there, you know, to warm it up, than it does warm water. So over the past, the seminar we just did at Castafari last week, I was showing slides from 2019 on the same day. I think it was August 6th, 2019 up to last year. And you could see the cold water growing. And if you guys wanted to check that out for yourself, on the free chart, if you guys aren't aware, you can go on Rutgers. If you go on Google, you can type in Rutgers, water, sea surface or water temp, and then you can pick which area you want to see, and it will show you the satellite images dating back, I think, the last 10 years for any day you choose, and it'll show you exactly what the water temperatures were in those areas. And that's how we kind of determine where we're going to go early in the season, by looking at what last year did and setting up a pattern for ourselves. So July and August are typically what, you know, we do a ton of trips in July and August because the weather's nice. It's usually pretty calm. You don't get a lot of storms. And this is when we find the fish setting up what we call residency, where the fish are going to come in and they're going to be comfortable. They're going to stay in an area. Now, when I mean an area, I don't mean an area the size of this place. I mean an area like a 20 square mile area. So, let me give you an example. So, east side of the bank, again, I don't know how many of you guys fish the Cape, but east side of the bank, Pekin Hill, Bend in the Lanes, right? That's like a 15, 20 mile area. That is one area where a residency or a body of fish will take up for the summer. They can go 10 miles today, they can go 10 miles tomorrow, but they'll typically be in that area. That being said, we have had fish, we had a satellite tag fish that went from Stellwagen to George's Bank and back in a 36-hour period. I mean, that's 160 miles each way. It's 320 miles, and he did it in a 36-hour period. So who knows where they're going to go and what they're going to do because they're tuna. But if you find fish in that area, the likelihood in July and August is they're going to stay there. They found the bait, the salinity's good, the temperature's good, the currents are good. They have found everything that they like, and they're going to stay there. A couple years back, these fish set up a pattern where they were going from the southeast corner to Pekin Hill, and they were going back and forth. So if we went to the southeast corner to start the day and we didn't find fish or mark fish or see fish, we would run into the bar. If they weren't in the bar, we would either wait a half an hour and they would show up, or we'd run back to the southeast corner because they were in transition. They were going from one spot to the other. If we were on the southeast corner and it was really good, we had a real good morning, slack came through, magic hour went through, and then all of a sudden the fish disappeared, we'd wait another hour, we'd run to the bar, and they'd be there. So they would switch places where they're feeding or where they're setting up residency on the tide. But that's only a 6 mile run for them. From the extreme southeast corner to the outside of the bar, it's only 6.5 miles. So it's an easy run for a fish that swims 45 miles an hour, you know? So, bites tend to be early in the day. We all know that. But that's fishing in general for any fish that we're going to fish for. If you're looking for top water, you want to be out in the, typically in the beginning of the day. I start to lose confidence at around 9 or 10 o'clock if I haven't seen anything or found anything yet, because I just feel like I'm missing the boat on the whole thing. That being said, the later in the season you get, when the surface temperatures are going to start to drop a little bit, you get cloudy days, you get rainy days, you get foggy days. Foggy days can be really good if you have an open array radar and you know how to use your radar. You can find the birds in the fog, and it doesn't matter if you can see the birds or not. I can come through the fog, and all of a sudden the radar will tell me this is where the birds are. I'll go over there, and I'll hear the fish. I'll hear the birds from a couple hundred yards away, and the radar will tell me exactly where to go. So on the low light days, it can be good throughout the day, but the days you want to look for, the days I like, are a little bit cloudy. I don't like greasy calm. I've never liked greasy calm water. The fish get too smart. They can hear too much. They can see too much. All of that stuff isn't great. It's not favorable for fish. I want a little chop on the water. Freshwater guys used to call it the musky chop because it's just a little bit of a chop to stir up the water, but not enough to slow you down. In your boat, you can still get anywhere you want as fast as you need to get there. Summer crowds put down the fish south of the vineyard, Nantucket. You see this all the time. I hear guys all the time. They're like, "Yeah, we just go out and we look for the crowd of boats." Right? That's a terrible idea. Right? Just. I've never understood that unless you're really new to it. I've never understood that, especially when these guys come into a crowd of boats and they look around and nobody's catching fish. Like, why are you staying there? You're staying there because everybody else is there, right? So you're all not going to be productive at the same time, right? Go out and find your own fish. Go look for whales, porpoise, dolphin, shearwaters, gannets. Go look for life on your own. You know what I mean? It'll be much more satisfying in the end. I've seen it. I'll come into a crowd of boats like that, and I'll usually stay on the outskirts of it, and I'll look with binoculars, and I'll watch what these boats are doing. And you can tell right off the bat if all these boats, have an idea of what they're doing, or is everybody else just watching everybody else? A lot of my clients have said to me, they're like, "Why are you going over there? All the boats are over there." And I said, "That's why I'm going over there. Because this is a big ocean. Twin to swim, they're fast, they're aggressive. They're not all going to be there. Trust me on that." And last year we were down south a couple times, and we drove right by the fleet, and we found fish, for miles, all on our own, But you have to have the confidence within yourself to go do that, Have a pattern, have a plan. So when you leave the dock in the morning, have an idea of where you're going to go, right? Like, I always have an idea, like, I'm going to aim at this spot. I'm going to say, for example, down there, we're going to say, I'm going to go to Cox's, then I'm going to go to the Claw, then I'm going to go to the northeast corner of the dump. Have a triangle set up, a pre-planned triangle set up in your head on where you're going to go. Have a plan. That plan might completely get thrown out if you have reasons to, if you see other life. But have an idea. Just going out and following other boats, it's not a great idea. Because you don't know who you're following, you don't know the scale of who you're following, and a lot of the time the guys down there are new to it. that's a fairly new fishery. You know, I just think that a lot of times guys should go out on their own because you're going to learn a little bit more on your own than watching everybody else. You know, September and October, probably my two best favorite months to fish. If I were to pick 4 months out of the year, it would be the last 2 weeks of September, first 2 weeks of October. Those are the 4 weeks that I would probably focus on if I had guys coming from overseas. The only issue with that time of year is hurricane season, and you can get a northeast wind whipped up for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It'll keep us off the water because we'll have northeast swells. And now this is east of the Cape, right, mind you, not south of the Vineyard, because down there the wind, you can hide down by Nomans and a little, you know, south of the Vineyard, you can hide from the northeast there. East side of the Cape, I can't hide from the northeast anywhere except in the bay. So that time of year is a really, really good year because what it is you have the southern fish that are, you know, coming up, you know, Chatham, and they're moving around, they're still coming in from the east, but north of that in Canada, Maine, that water temperature is starting to cool down, and you have those northern fish that are starting to move south. So the fish that are moving north are going to bump into that cold water and stop. The fish that are coming from the north are going to start moving south, and when they hit that warm water, they're going to stop too. So you get this big body of fish now that's all sitting in similar temperature waters. These fish are getting ready for their migration. They're getting ready to go south, either down to OBX, you know, a lot of them go to Mexico, or they're going to turn east and they're going to go straight over the Mediterranean. So these fish are putting on fat. They're putting on calories. They want to eat as much as they can to store it for their migration. You can tell what they're eating and how they're eating it because of what they need to put on. For example, herring, bluefish, bunker, huge mackerel, huge fat content bait, right? Butterfish, half-beaks, sand eels, no fat in those things at all. That's why the fish have to keep eating those. They won't ever satisfy themselves with their fat storage because those bait fish don't have any. It's like us eating string beans versus a porterhouse all the time. There's no fat and stuff. Like I compare it to lettuce all the time. We could eat lettuce and it'll fill us up, but there's no nutritional value in lettuce that's going to help us. You know, nobody runs a marathon and eats a head of lettuce before the marathon, right? They want to eat stuff that's going to, you know, help them get through that marathon, carbohydrates and protein, stuff like that. That's what the tuna need to do. So if you're going to try to focus on what bait and where they're going to be at that time of year, you typically want to look for the fattiest type of bait that they might chase around. Again, now the tuna need to eat constantly, so they're going to eat anything that's in front of them, right? But that's just one of the things that we found. That's why the tuna the prices for them get higher and they get better as the season goes on, you know. September, October, not so much. I don't know why I have that in there. I'll change that, but August and September are the 2 months that I tend to focus on what we call a jig bite, right? A jig bite is when a group of fish has taken up, again, residency in an area. So if you're drifting along and you have your jigs here and you mark a body of fish, 20, 30, 40, 50 fish on the screen, and then that's all you mark, and then you do another drift, you don't mark anything, you do another drift, you don't mark anything, that's not a jig bite. That's, you just marked one school of fish, right? That's all together. A jig bite is when I'm drifting along and I mark a fish every 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, I mark one here, one there, one there, one here, one there. That's what I want to see as a jig bite because those fish are comfortable. They've set up where they want to stay. They don't have to be in big schools to feel safe. There's no safety in numbers with them. They set up an area and they're just living in that area. That's what I want to see for a jig bite because when you see this big school of fish, yeah, you're probably going to hook up, right? Your jig probably won't make it to the bottom. You're going to hook up, but then what? Then you have to hope that school swims under you again. When you have these single marks here and there, that's what you want to see, because you'll consistently catch fish until you drift out of that area. And when you drift out of that area, you'll find a subtle difference: water temperature change, salinity change, turbidity, something like that, depth. You'll find a little bit of a change that's almost this invisible barrier that has kept those fish in that area, right? So a jig bite is typically, in my opinion, August, September. After that, the temperature of the surface starts to cool down, and the thermocline isn't as set up as it was in the summer months. So the fish tend to start moving around more and more and more. You know, so reading the birds. This could be a 6-hour seminar on reading the birds. If you guys learn to read the birds, you will find fish all the time. These birds will tell you every single thing you need to know. Now, east of the Cape is completely different than Jersey, New York, or south of the Vineyard. What we look for east of the Cape is completely different than what you look for down there. What you pay attention to down there, I don't care about east of the Cape. Petrels, everybody knows those, Jesus birds, the little black ones that dance on the water. I don't care about those east of the Cape. They never mean anything to me east of the Cape. Porpoise, dolphin, don't care about those east of the Cape. Never have. They've never amounted to anything. South of the Vineyard, if you see either of those, you stick with it, because it's most likely fish. Shearwaters, I mean, we all love to hate them, but shearwaters will drive you absolutely insane, but they'll save your day 90% of the time if you know what they're looking at. Seagulls are just seagulls. Typically closer to shore, you're going to see a lot of seagulls. The farther you go offshore, you don't really see them unless there's a dragger in the area. And the seagulls are taking up residency on that dragger. They just kind of live around that dragger until it goes home. The farther offshore you go, the more important birds become. Okay? So if we're a mile or two offshore, half a mile offshore, 3, 4, 5 miles offshore, we see birds, yeah, we pay attention to them. But not as much as we would if we were 15, 20 miles offshore and we saw 5 or 6 birds all by themselves. There's a reason why those birds are in that area that far offshore versus over there. You pay attention to the birds offshore. So, height of the birds. Height of the birds typically is showing you and telling you how deep the fish are, right? So the birds that are up at the ceiling are telling you that the fish are down deep. They need the height, the same way humans would, to see down deep to see the fish. If those birds start slowly coming down, you know those fish are slowly coming up to the surface. And a lot of the times, once those birds get right down to the surface, you're going to see an explosion or splash underneath them, because they're predicting what those fish are going to do. And that's a good way to signify, to tell you, do we have to jig or do we have to use topwater or poppers? You can see birds, buzzards, and turkey vultures do that all the time. When they have something on the ground, they're going to circle around it up the top. It's the same thing that shearwaters do. Now, bait size. I don't have this up here, but bait size. So you can tell what they're feeding on based on what kind of bird it is, typically, right? Piping plovers, terns, little birds going to be eating micro bait, rain bait, tiny little stuff, right? Shearwaters will eat anything that they can put in their mouth, right? So usually shearwaters are going to just basically eat everything. Gannets tend to focus more on bigger bait, mackerel, shearwaters. There's not a lot of things that eat the half-beaks because there's not a lot of birds that are fast enough to catch the half-beaks. So if you see gannets usually up real high because they're aiming and then they dive down. That's usually bigger bait. Shearwaters, typically sand eels, stuff like that. If I were to pick one bait that I always want the tuna to be on, one bait would probably be sand eels. The sand eels are, they don't have a plan. They're pretty dumb. The fish come blasting through them. The sand eels are going to split up. They're going to spread out. They're going to go all over the place. And then you can wait. Because 10, 15 minutes later, those sea deers are going to all find each other. They're going to get back together, and they're screw up again, and the fish are going to blast through them again, and they're going to show you where they are again. Right? Half beaks. If I have guys in the boat that really know how to cast and that are really dialed in, I want half beaks because the fish get so fired up when they're on those half beaks to eat anything shiny that is put in front of them where it should be. The issue with half beaks, though, is your casting has to be spot on. It's going to be way in front of them, and it has to be in the same direction that the half beaks are being chased and the tuna are moving. 90% of the time when I watch people do that for the first time, they're casting way behind where they need to be casting, and the fish are long gone. You know, so birds sitting in the water, that's another big one. Depending on where you are, if you are 5, 6, 8, 10 miles offshore or farther, and you see a pile of birds sitting in the water, pay attention to that pile of birds. Watch what they're doing. How tight are they sitting together? Are their heads in the water? Are they looking down? It's worth it for you guys to sit there for 10, 15 minutes to see what happens. Right? There's a reason why they're all sitting together. Right? Why are they over there? Why are they over here? They're all sitting together. Pay attention to what they're doing. It's worth it. It might be good, might not, but it's better. If you look around, you don't see anything else, there's a reason why they're there. Did a feed just happen? Did it go down? Are they waiting for it to happen again? Who knows? It's worth your time to investigate that. You know, fast-moving birds. You can, if you watch these birds flying, you can actually tell if they're looking, following, or they're just going somewhere. You can tell by the shape of them. If they're just going somewhere, typically their heads are tucked in, and they're just in a straight pattern, like flying. But then the other ones you can tell, just 2, 3 of them, and they're diving, they're swooping, they're coming up, they're going down. Every once in a while, then they'll start hovering, right? A bird that's flying somewhere and all of a sudden starts hovering is one of the best things you can see if you're looking for fish on the surface, because that bird is watching something down there that just stopped, it did a circle, it dove, it came up, it chased something. There's no reason a bird would stop and hover like that unless it was watching something. So watching every move that these birds make is probably one of the most important things you guys can do, which will help you become successful. If we have birds sitting around, and this is something I want you guys to all do and try to pay attention to next time you're out. This is what helped me years ago. If you have a pile of birds sitting around, say a feed goes down, feed comes back up, goes down, and I had there was another charter captain that was doing it for 5 or 6 years before me, and I still remember this. It was like my second year doing it. I watched him put his boat in gear, and he took off a little bit, and he started going towards somewhere, and I didn't know what he was doing. I was like, where's he going? What did he see? And then all of a sudden he's sitting here, and right next to him pops up this feed, and they double up. I didn't know what he saw, right? I asked him later, and he told me he follows a single bird, right? So if you have a pile of birds sitting around on the surface, there's always going to be that first one that sees, hears anything, that next feed coming up. He sees a fish, he senses it, he feels a vibration. There's always going to be the first bird to get up and go towards the fish, right? Follow that first bird. Always follow it. And people say, oh, we didn't pay attention because there was only one bird. Every feed starts with one bird, right? Every one of them starts with the first bird. So all you have to do is you don't have to hammer it, you don't have to throttle down. All you do is put your motor in gear, one click, start that momentum at where that bird is going. And what you're doing is you're setting yourself up to be in an area closer to where it's going to happen. If you follow that first bird, more than likely, you will see your success rate go up because you're going to put yourself in an area before it happens. You're going to give yourself that 30 more seconds that every other boat is waiting for splashes. They're like, oh, they're splashing. You're already over there because you followed that one telltale sign to get there, you know? Binoculars are the most important tool on my boat. I love them. And I have 3 pairs on the boat. I used to have image stabilizers. I'm sure a bunch of you guys have image stabilizers. I'm done buying them. I've broken 2 pairs, We drop them on the floor, we break the gyro, and they won't fix them after that. And you just take $3,000 and throw away. I'm done buying them until they make a pair that the gyro won't break. I'm using regular Nikons or Canons. I think the pairs I have are around 60 bucks. If you're going to buy a good pair of binoculars, what I suggest for you guys is I want you to try that pair of binoculars on. Look at it, feel it. I have some really expensive pairs on my boat that my wife bought me. They don't fit my head well. They don't match up with my eyes well. And the $60 pair fits me much better. I can see better out of it. So just because they're expensive doesn't mean they're the best. Binoculars, I suggest having 1 or 2 pairs on the boat. If you guys are going somewhere, you haven't seen anything in a while, you haven't seen any fish, whales, marks, nothing, stop. Scan your horizon with the binoculars. I can't tell you how many times that has saved my entire day. If I'm heading straight south and I look over the east and I see 2 birds diving around 2 miles away from me, we'll take a hard left, we'll go right over those birds, and we'll stay there for the rest of the day because there's a ton of fish there. Right? Completely change what I was planning on doing for the day into something very, very productive. Right? Big ocean, you can't look at it all. Keep everybody on your boat looking too. Right? I had these clients on the boat a couple years ago. I go, come on guys, help me look. They're like, isn't that your job? And I said, that's my job, but I still can only look in one direction at one time. Right? So this is only going to help you guys. All I need to see sometimes is one splash right over there. Right? So always be looking. Binoculars are one of the most important tools I have on the boat. Don't spend too much time looking at one area. Like this is what I call them, the gambler. You know when to hold them, know when to fold them type thing. You don't want to spend too much time, and I'll tell you why, in an area, because if you want to get somewhere, you have a plan, and you see something, you're like, oh, that looks real good, let's go check it out. There's birds, whales, everything's there. That doesn't mean there's tuna there. Everything might show you, yes, this all typically is in the same area when the tuna are, but tuna aren't attracted to birds, they're not attracted to whales. They don't care that they're there. Those 2 things are there because of the bait. If the tuna have found better bait somewhere else, they're going to stay there. Yes, all of them tend to go together, but birds and whales doesn't mean there's tuna there. If you're in an area that's full of life, and I've seen this time and time again, full of life, if you don't mark a fish, or see a fish, or hook up in 20 minutes, they're not there. Leave. And I know it's hard to do, but you're going to waste your time. And those are the days at the end you're like, oh man, we shouldn't have spent all morning there. There was nothing there, right? That doesn't mean they're there. Beacon Hill, and I talk about Beacon Hill probably more than I should because I grew up fishing it, and now it's become this real popular place. Beacon Hill is notorious for keeping people there longer than they need to be there because there's always life there. It always looks like National Geographic there. If the tuna are there, you're going to see them. If they're not, tuna don't hide. Now, one thing I would suggest for everybody to do is get dialed in with your side scan, right? Side scan has really saved us in the past 3 or 4 years because if a tuna are running around on the surface and they're 10 feet down, you're never going to mark them on your down scan or your chart. You're not going to, because your boat's going to come over them and it's going to put them down, right? But if those tuna want to sit 10 feet down, and they're not splashing, they're just slowly picking off bait, you're never going to see them. You never even know they're there, right? Those are one of the instances where a side scan will tell you, yes, those fish are 8 to 10 feet down, over there, over here, right? All it's doing is letting you know I have to change how I'm fishing or how I'm approaching these fish. And yes, they are here. So when I'm in an area, I don't need GPS. I typically put down scan on one screen and I put my side scan on another screen. And I won't mark them on the down scan, even with split frequencies, but I'll mark them on the side scan, So that's one thing I suggest is try to get dialed in with your side scan. You could do it with striped bass. You know what I mean? But get dialed in with your side scan, because a lot of the time that will save your trip. You know, casting on feeding fish. Right? Casting on feeding fish is a little more difficult than guys tend to think if you want to be successful all the time, right? I call it splitting the feed. So if you have this big rager going on, you know, a lot of time guys will come up and instinctively fire cast right into the middle of it, right? I suggest people to not do that. I want people to cast to the outside of the feeds. I want your lures to stand out. I want your lures to look solitary. I want your lures to look injured. I want your lures to look like an easy meal. When you cast in the middle of the feed, you're putting your lure in the middle of all that other bait. You know, now you're creating competition for your own lure. You know what I mean? The fish don't want to work harder than they need to work. You know, cast to the outside, you're going to stay away from the birds. Half the time, more than half the time, if you put your lure in the middle of the feed, that shearwater is going to wrap your braid around its wing. He's going to eat. He's going to get hooked. And now you're going to have to reel his bird in while you watch these fish raging off. So try casting to the outsides of the feed. Center console guys, most of those are center console guys that chase these fish on the surface. A little advice I can give you guys is, if you're driving a boat and you're coming up to a feed, these fish are raging on the surface. Most people, not everybody, but most people are right-handed, okay? If you're coming up to this feed here, stay to the right of the feed. If you stay to the right of the feed, the people are going to be able to cast over the bow to get to that feed. If you come up to the left side of the feed, the right-handed people are now going to have to cast over your console to cast. It makes everything harder, especially when everybody's adrenaline's pumped up and things go wrong, right? So make it easier on the people casting by where you come up to it. Another question I get all the time is, you know, they're scared of the boat. They're scared of the boat. You know, tuna are not scared of your boat. They don't care about your boat. They're not scared of it. They don't care at all. What scares the tuna is the harmonics of your motors, right? That's what they don't like. And it's not that they're scared of it. They don't know what it is. They don't know how to understand it or comprehend it. So their solution is leave. Anybody who hunts in here is the same thing. Deer, turkey, all that stuff. They don't stick around to see what the issue is. They just leave. It's easier for them to do that. So when you're going racing up to a feed, your motors are screaming at 6,000 RPMs. That is so loud under the water. Now you get up next to it, you come right back down to neutral, it's silent. Those fish don't know what just happened. That's what scares those fish away, right? Stick boat captains, guys who harpoon all the time, one of the most important parts of their entire operation is the harmonics on that boat. If they're coming up behind a fish, the guy's up on the pulpit, he's holding the dart, he's ready to throw, and the guy bumps the RPMs in the boat for some reason, the fish will just sink out. Because it's the change in harmonics. They do not touch the throttle. That's what scares these tuna away when you come up to a feed. If you're fighting a fish, and some of you guys have probably noticed this, some of the best feeds we've ever seen are when we're fighting a fish already. The fish don't even know we're there. Nothing has changed. The boat's quiet. The throttles are quiet. And they'll come up and they'll feed right next to the boat. Because nothing has changed. No harmonics has changed at all. You know? A lot of my sponsors are here. You know, I work real closely with a bunch of, you know, some of the most high-end sponsors out there. You know, Dyra, that's mine up in the corner, Bluefin Plus, UBT Fishing, Siren Lures, Hoagie, top of the line, Lures, Villavas, and Cortland Holocore. I've been using ZCL rods. These are Zach's rods. Probably one of the most influential entrepreneurs that I've ever dealt with. And, you know, he's almost like a son to me when it comes to this. He's younger, but I'd be proud to have somebody who's as dialed into this fishery. And we've worked together for so many years, and we've basically designed what we consider to be the apex tuna rod, and it's the only tuna rod you should have. Every charter captain on the boat fishes these rods, and there's a reason why every tuna captain on the Cape fishes. As you see our rods, it's because they don't break. They've been dialed in and they've been built over years of guys like me and friends, and we've been fine-tuning it with the factories, and they're all American-made bikes. If you guys ever have issues with the CCR rods, you come see me. I will send you one of mine if you can't get a hold of Zach, right? But if you're going to, one thing I can tell you guys, if you're going to invest in your tackle, and this is something I didn't do in the beginning, if you're going to invest in tackle, do it once and do it right. Buy good reels, buy good rods. Don't cheap out in the beginning like I did, right? I bought the lower end stuff, and now that stuff just sits there because it has no value and nobody wants it, and I eventually bought the better stuff anyway. Just bite the bullet and do it once in the beginning, The UBT jigs, the booth is too over right here. I suggest you guys going. I think they're almost running out. But if you go over to Tack Waterman's booth, Tack is the only person in the show right now, I think, that has a big selection of UBT jigs left. They're doing, I think it's buy 3 or buy 4. I don't know what it is, but it's buy 3 or buy 4, get one free. You know what I mean? So you go buy them anywhere in the show, and then you go over to the UBT booth with the receipt, and they will hand you one of the jigs for free after that. So any questions you guys have on the rods, rigging, anything like that, come up to me, grab me, and I'll get you guys dialed in as best as I can to this fishery, because I want to see all of you guys succeed. And I don't want you guys making the same mistakes I did over the years. All right? What do you guys got? Any questions? I use, so that all depends on which brand you're going to use, right? So a lot of the brands that we have, now I'll just say Power Pro, for example. It's a very popular brand, right? Power Pro 80 breaks at like 125. So a lot of the brands, you don't actually know what you're getting. You know what I mean? You're getting a rough estimate, because what they do is they overrate it. So people say Power Pro is very strong. I'm like, of course it is, because it breaks way under what they rated at. So of course it's going to come across as strong. I've been using Verivas for 4 years now. I mean, Japanese company. They make some of the top products on the planet. They're so good. Their line is IGFA rated, so it will break at exactly what they say it's going to break at. You can buy 86 pound. So that's what I'm saying is, you have to kind of determine what brand you're putting on your wheel to know what you're going to fit based on the specs behind it. The diameters that they put on the lines, I don't really believe a lot of the diameters. I think they're done on formulas, because how do you measure the diameter of anything that flattens, right? Like when you're putting a micrometer on these lines, at what point do you stop moving the micrometer down to determine that's the diameter of the line? You know what I mean? And how are you measuring something that flattens at 0.0016? I mean, you can't freeze it. Oh, yeah, right. But at what point? Do you have a barrier? Do you have a casing on it now? Is there humidity? Is there anything? The only way we've determined line and diameter and thickness is we've actually weighed it, right? So you take a scale that goes down to like, 1,000th of a gram, and you cut a 1 foot section of line off, and you weigh it, and you see exactly what it weighs, so you can tell how thick this line is versus how thick. That's one of the only ways we've done it. Quickly with your question, if you're going with a generic, Power Pro or Suffix or something like that, I would, what size reel? 18? Like 18, I would go with 18 and 20s, I would go around 80, right? 14s, 10s and 14s, I would go around 50 to 65 in those brands. Now Verivas, which has true braking strength, I would go higher. Right? I use like 112. on my 18s and 20s because that is still thinner than Power Pro 80 because of the braking strength. That's what I'm saying, you know. On my 10s and 14s with Veravas, I go with 60 to 80. Leader, I use mono leader. I don't use fluorocarbon. It blows everybody's mind. Fluorocarbon's a waste of money. The industry has told you to use fluorocarbon your entire lives, your entire fishing career. You fluorocarbon this, fluorocarbon that. Come on. You got these big giant treble hooks hanging off of these lures. The fish don't see that. They don't see anything, but they swim in front of the lure to look at the fluorocarbon and try to, you know, I mean, if you guys make spreader bars by hand, you never make them out of fluorocarbon. You say it's a big giant waste of money, right? But now a lure that's being ripped through the water, the fish are going to come up behind it, and you have 4O trebles hanging off of this fish, right? And now we have to have line in the front that's really clear. We did a test at Castafari last week. We hung 8 lines in a 55-gallon fish tank. I hung 4 Veravas lines, and then I hung multiple fluorocarbon lines. People were up and we were giving away spools. They're like, none of those are fluorocarbon except that one, right? And they pointed at the only mono that I put in the tank, right? So just because the industry tells you to use fluorocarbon because they make a ton of money off of it. I haven't touched fluorocarbon in 12 years, right? 12 years. Come over to the booth. I'll show you this Veravas shock leader that I use. It's $22. It's about 50 yards they give. It's incredible stuff. It's crystal clear. Try not using fluorocarbon, right? And see what happens, right? It'll work. I use on the spinning rods, I typically don't go under 80 on my smaller rods. I go with 130 to, it depends on the fish, size fish, but to 120 to 140 on with an FG 8-foot leader. I want my junction on my leader to be right about here, in between the reel and the stripper guide. I don't want any leader on my reel at all. None. Right? I want my splice, my FG to be right about here. Jigging rod here, right? You can use, you know, your leader can be on your reel here. Because it doesn't matter. Because you're not casting. You don't care about this. You're dropping straight down. You know? Anything else?
Tie your leader right to the split ring?
Tie my leader right to the split ring, or swivel. So on your jigging rod, you're going to go swivel, split ring, assist hook. Okay? The jig will sit independent. The jig will sit independent on the same split ring that your assist hook is on. So you don't have to take, you know, at the end of the day, you're just taking split ring pliers and you're ripping the jig off. And the hook stays on your rod, just like this. So like my jig wallet, got 50 jigs in it. There's not a hook on any jigs in there. There's one little sleeve that's got 50 hooks in it, right? I put the hook on the rod and it stays on that rod. And then the jig comes on and off, on and off, on and off all day long. At the end of the day, it comes off so I don't bang up my rod on the way home. And in the morning, put it back on, right? That's the quickest, easiest, best way to set up your jig setup right there. Super easy. I tie all of my leaders with either a Palomar or a Berkeley traveling knot going to my swivel. You know? Anything else? No? Guys, if you have any questions,